Hello and welcome back to the 7th episode of How to Play Paragon. Today we're going to be looking at the mid lane and how you should be playing that lane in particular. If you are new to this lane, I would highly recommend looking into playing someone like Howitzer, who is a ranged hero. You can play melee, but it's obviously going to be a lot harder if they have a ranged hero and know what they're doing. Hero choice in the mid lane is a rather big deal. Your whole point in the mid lane is to farm up, get stronger, and also trade with your enemy and hopefully come out on top with a couple of kills. Decks also weigh on this factor heavily, so please make sure that you have thought about your deck or just copied someone else's build that works. Although if you are making your own deck, think about the card choices that you're making. Does this work well with this hero? Will this synergize well with this hero's kit? The first thing that you're going to do when you get to lane is you're going to start getting minions in the middle like this. I'm pushing it for a reason. I would recommend if you're new to the lane, just leave them to the last hit, and then that way the lane doesn't push towards your enemy. A good habit to get into is if your enemy comes towards your side of the lane, because the minion's closer to you than it is to them, hit them when they try and get the last hit. They will start to panic and either fail to get the last hit, or they will actually just take the minion, but they will have taken a lot of damage from you just trying to get it. The next thing to talk about while laning is warding. You should pretty much always have wards up. You can have it here to control the buff and see when people are going for it, or you can have it here to see when the enemy jungler is coming out of his jungle and through the fog wall. You can do the same thing on the opposite side pretty much. You can have it either watching the buff to see when the river buff comes up, or you can have it to see if the enemy jungler is going in your jungle. You should never neglect having wards, as they are very useful tools and will often prevent you from being killed. Now you may remember me mentioning punishing people for going for last hits and also talking about river buff control. This is the reason why I said you should always have the river buff warded and have wards up. If your enemy goes for the river buff, you can just punish them for going for it. They may have got the mana, but you got a kill. River buff control also helps your jungler due to the fact that he then knows when the river buffs are up. It may or may not help him to then get the river buff, and that may enable him to actually gank a lane, which could potentially get your team a kill. One thing while laning that you should be aware of is that you shouldn't be scared of taking damage. If you get damage off that's equal or more to what they do to you, it is definitely worth what you just did. Either you'll be forced back at similar times, or the next time you will actually win the trade and either get a kill or force him back while you can continue to farm. As you can see in this instance, the minions were the only thing really doing damage to me, as he never actually hit any skills. So right now he's very low and he should be backing. Luckily for me, he decides to be greedy and I can just flick a missile at him. This is also a good time to say if you really need to back, don't go for that extra last hit, because it'll probably be the one time that the guy actually kills you for it. Now you're probably wondering, when should the mid laner roam? And this comes down to a couple of things. The first thing that you should be thinking about is there a lane worth roaming to? If there is a lane worth roaming to, you have to then consider how fast could my enemy push this lane back towards me. Roaming's all well and good, but you want to make sure you still have a tower when you get back. Depending on how aggressive your lanes are, you may not actually have to roam at all game. As you can see here, both my lanes are actually pushed up and fighting on the left lane. So I decide it's more worth to actually just push into the tower before he comes back and try and deny him some XP and card XP. Another thing worth thinking about is, would I actually get seen while I'm on my way there? The enemy laners may have warded. To check, you can press tab, see if they have a shadow ward card. If they do, the probability is it's going to be warded somewhere around their lane. One thing I'm going to talk about before we move on to team fighting is what happens if you've lost your lane. Nobody has won 100% of every mid lane game that they've played. That's just an impossibility. How do you recover from a bad lane, or how do you recover from multiple deaths? And really the answer to that is you need to stop trading, so stop taking damage for damage because it's obviously not worked for you in the previous attempts, and really concentrate on getting that farm. The way that you can do this is just make sure that you are warded up. Make sure the enemy is constantly focused on you so that you can just move backwards and try and make it so that the minions freeze in front of your tower. And always make sure you have some mana. Mana will always allow you to escape if you need to. If he engages, you can always use your mine and bounce away from him. And always remember that farm is always way more worth than getting a kill. For example, if the enemy has 1 kill but 0 CS and you have 11 CS, you are actually ahead of him in card XP. Though if you really need to, you could always ask your jungler for a gank and see if you can level out the playing field. Now I'm going to be talking about your role in a team fight as the mid laner. Your role in a team fight is basically to be a second carry. Except for this time, you will most likely have some burst damage or some CC abilities in there in the mix as well. If you are confident in your ability, then you can try and use your CC abilities to try and start a fight with the enemy team. Other than this, you should be doing burst damage and staying fairly back and safe, making sure that you can do the damage output for the entirety of the fight. Though everybody makes mistakes, so if you do take a lot of damage, make sure that whatever you do, keep doing that damage that you were doing before. Your teammates will most likely try and help you out, and you never know, it might pay out for you in the end, even if you are pretty close to death. And I feel that covers the basics of the mid lane, so I'm just going to do a quick summary of the video. Hero and deck choice is really up to you, though I would recommend taking someone that's ranged if you've not played mid lane much before, and someone who does ability damage, because it's quite helpful in team compositions most of the time. Once you get to lane, make sure you're farming pretty much every minion that you can, and make sure that if the enemy makes a mistake, that you capitalise on it. You can do this either by punishing them for going for last hits, or you can just do it by hitting them with long ranged abilities. Also, don't be scared of trading damage. As long as you come out on top, it was worth for you. If you have a bad lane or you die, just focus on farming. The most likelihood is that if you keep farming and you're better than they are at farming, you will come out on top anyway, regardless of kills. If you really need to though, ask your jungler for a bit of help. When thinking about roaming, make sure you're thinking about the possibilities and outcome when you roam. Make sure the enemy has no wards, otherwise there's no point in going because your enemy is just going to push the wave back towards you anyway. In terms of team fights, you should be an alternate carry. You should be doing as much damage as possible during team fights while trying to stay safe and make sure that your carry is still alive. The mid laner is a necessity in any team fight, so please make sure that you don't get caught out in any way. If you do happen to get caught out, however, just make sure you do as much damage as possible. This will help your team out if they do have to commit to a fight. And that's all there really is to know about the mid lane basics. If you liked this video, give it a like. If you disliked it, give it a dislike. And if you really like me, give me a subscribe. I hope to see you here for the next tutorial.